Hopefully this is coming on soon. Things are happening. Excellent. Hello coders, happy Friday. It is 7:56 BST in the UK here. It's a bit of a later stream, I do apologise. Last night I was so busy doing bits and pieces for the YouTube channel that I overslept. So I'm here now, and today we're going to be focusing on the invoice item table, much like we did with the customer table, the invoice table, and the status table. We're going to just build that in SQL, and hopefully we can get this done quickly in the next sort of few minutes or so, because then that will round out this portion of this project really nicely. And of course, this project is the FreeCodeCamp PHP object-oriented programming course that I'm developing. Once this application, this invoice application, is built, then I can use that as a framework, if you will, to teach object-oriented programming. And we're building this invoicing application because I want to show how things can snap together and work together quite well. So these kind of things that we're playing with at the moment, the whole SQL stuff, it's not really going to be certainly not going to be in the actual course. But of course, we need to have this to actually build up the course. Bear with me just a second. I've just noticed something. Hold on. There we go. Lighting should be slightly better. Oh, hold on. You can tell I'm not that prepared today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the, where are we? Into the code. And what I didn't do yesterday is I didn't commit this stuff. So we're just going to quickly do that. We're going to do git status. So this is on the previous branch that we used. So just do a git branch, and that was all of that jazz. So I need to do a git add of those things. So I can do a git add of what was it? MySQL. So we're just going to commit this to the repository. So if I did a git status now, we should see that those have been added. And if I did a git commit -m, adding the invoice SQL. Awesome. Let's do a git origin push. Oh, come on. Of that branch, which is 20 MySQL schema invoice, 20 MySQL schema invoice. So I should have done this all yesterday, so I do apologize. Oh, sorry, it's git push origin, not git origin push, of course. Marvelous. Then I should be able to do a git. Well, hang on. Let me just have a gander. I believe it's just hub pull request. So on GitHub, I'm just having a look. Where's the hub.github.com? There we go. I just want to double check some things here. So we've cloned all the bits and pieces. We forked them. Pull request, that's all good. So there we go. We need to do a hub pull request. That's cool, and that looks good to me. So we're going to do a come out of this, do a write and quit. Marvelous. Then in the browser, come on. Here we should have a pull request, which we do, and we're just going to merge that in to master. We're going to delete that branch. Bye bye. and then we're going to go back into here, and we should all now be up to date. So we have the MySQL, we have the Schema, we have the Invoice.sql. That's what we created yesterday. We're going to create a similar one this time, but for the invoice item. So that's pretty good. Apologies for having to do that. I should have done that yesterday, but I was so busy yesterday. It was nuts. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new issue. Well, I'll close this issue first. I should have closed it. Bye-bye. And we're going to create a new one. And we're going to do create SQL, or let's keep the convention, MySQL schema for invoice item. Now, the invoice item is an interesting beast because it has all sorts of interesting things on it, such as, if I go back to the code, I will show you, in src, in entity, in type, in invoice item. Let's bring all this down, make some room. We don't have many properties, but the one that's really important is having a link back to the invoice. Now, we haven't actually put this in yet, so we do need to have an ID. So I'm going to have to put in another issue to update this entity. This needs to be an association back to the invoice that the invoice item belongs to. We won't put it in yet. I'll create a task for that, an issue for that. But essentially, we have a reference data description, unit price, units, and then total. But we also do need to have an invoice ID as well. So let's build that through. So what I need to do is go back to the browser, and I'm just going to fill out all of this stuff. So we have the ID, we have the invoice ID2, we have the reference. Is it reference or is it description? It is, yeah, it is reference. We also have a description. Come on, if I can spell description, that'd be lovely. I can't spell description, can I? So the reference is going to be null. Description won't be. And then what else do we have? We have the unit price. This is going to be a decimal. We also have the units, which is going to be an integer. And then we have the total. Because if you think of an invoice where you have many invoice items, line items, if you will, you could say a line item could be a portion of work, and I've done a portion, a number of hours that make up that invoice item. So those number of hours would be the units, right? So if I did 5 hours work on this invoice item, then I would put 5 in for the units. The unit price would be the single unit price. So if I was charging, I don't know, whatever per particular unit, then that would be in the unit price, and then that would be the sum of that would be in the total. So we're going to build all of this mechanics and on all of this stuff when we get to it. So we also need to have a date created, and we also need to have a date updated, because this is all of the stuff that we need. All the stuff in the abstract entity. So that's looking cool. We're going to just submit this now. Reference is null because not all items have a reference. They could just be using the description, for example. But if you had a stock, for instance, of things, you might have a stock number that is associated to that reference. Lots of different industries, businesses do all of this stuff differently. So, having this ability to do it in a flexible manner is quite good. So, we're going to go back to the code now, and we're going to start building this out. And we're going to follow the same convention as the other schemas. So we have the invoice here. I'm going to copy the invoice and I'm going to paste it in the schema, and I'm going to change its name to be invoice_item. And we're copying it because it's got the foreign keys and stuff that we used last time. That's what we're going to use for the invoice ID. So we've also got a varchar here. It's not null. This time it is null. So we're going to put null in here. We have the total, which is a decimal. That's going to be changed to be no, we can still keep that. That is the total. That's cool. Awesome. We don't have VAT. We don't have status ID. Status ID, however, can be changed to the invoice ID, like so. And what else do we need? We've got the date created and the date updated. That's cool. We don't have the customer ID, so that goes. We also have the description. So the description is going to be nullable. Whoops. If I can paste that in, that'd be lovely. Or not. There we go. So that's going to be the description. That will be not null. That won't be nullable. And then we have the unit price, which will be a decimal because it could be £2.50. It could be 250. So that is the unit underscore price. And then we have the units, which is going to be an integer. I suppose what I should do, just for design's sake, is put the units and the unit price together. And then we have the total. So let's go and refresh. So we have the ID, that's fine. We have the reference, which is good, which is nullable. We have the description, which is not nullable because you have to put in a description. We have the unit price, which is a decimal, and that is also going to be not nullable. Units, which is not nullable. Total units, total, which is not nullable. Invoice ID. Again, we need to have an invoice. It's chicken and egg kind of thing. This is why we've done this at the end, because this needs to have the invoice for this to exist. We can't just create an invoice item without an invoice. So we need to have that. And then we have the date created and the date updated, and that will keep them to those. So that's pretty good. What I need to do, of course, is I need to change these foreign keys and references. We don't have the customer, so that's going to go. Goodbye. And then we have the status. That's going to change, isn't it, to the invoice ID. So we're going to copy that, paste that into there, and that reference is going to be of there. I need to change that to be the invoice, and I need to change the reference to be the invoice too, because that references the table, which is invoice. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Drop table if exists. That needs to be, of course, invoice item. We're not going to drop the invoice table. That's silly. And abracadabra, I think that's pretty much covering it. I think. I feel like I've just blown through that, so I'm hoping that's going to work. Let's hit save. One thing I haven't done, because of course I'm late, is I didn't set up the Docker machines, so bear with me just a second whilst I sort that out. Docker machine start. It's probably actually going to be in my reverse search. Docker machine start. Here we go. Boom. So reverse searching is really helpful. It's Control and R on the keyboard, and it goes. You can start typing, and it goes back through your history. So I knew that the command started with Docker machine, so I typed that in. As you probably saw, I got a load of other bits and pieces like the eval stuff, which I'm going to use in just a second once this machine is up. But then I found that I typed in S, and then I got start, and then I didn't have to type in the whole how to code well, OOP PHP malarkey. One thing also I've just remembered I haven't done is I haven't actually put this into into its own a branch, so I need to do that pretty sharpish. Okay, so that's evaluated that. Oh, sorry, that's started the machine. We can do an eval of all of this goodness. Docker ps-a. That is down for some reason, but we can bring that up. We can do Docker reverse search again. Let's do an up. We don't need to do a build. That should hopefully start that. Yes. So if I did a Docker ps-a, that should be up. I'll need to look into that, why that was down. That was the web server that was down, interestingly. Maybe I need to put in a restart or something on the Docker Compose. I'll have a look at that later. I'll put a note, a mental note down, and I'll take a look at that later. I'll create an issue. But talking about issues, we obviously need to sort this out, because if I did git branch, we are actually still on the old branch. Which is daft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick git checkout of master. Before I do that, I'm just going to grab all of this code because I don't want to lose it, and I'm going to just bung it locally on my machine because I am not typing all that out again. Docker machine checkout to master. We're going to do a git pull to pull in the changes of master that we've just merged previously, and then we're going to do a git branch -d to delete that local branch that we created, which is 20 MySQL schema invoice. 20 MySQL schema invoice, like so. So that's deleted. And then what I'm going to do is a git checkout -b, because we want to create this branch. This branch issue number is is it 20? Let me see. 20. Although I've just noticed something massively problematic here. Create MySQL schema for invoice item. No, that is correct. It's invoice 22. That's what I was looking at. All right. Go back to the code. So this is 22, and then this is MySQL schema invoice invoice item. There we go. So we're going to check that out, and that's changed. We've also actually added that, which is pretty awesome. So that's gone in too. So we still have that file, and even though we're on that branch. So I just copied that for, for giggles, really. So if I did git git status, we should see that modified. So I need to add that. But let's go and first, before we get ahead of ourselves, test this out. So we're going to dive into the container, and I'll demonstrate how to do that. I demonstrated it yesterday, but just for my own clarity's sake, we're going to go back to the browser. This is in the FreeCodeCamp PHP OOP repo of my PFWD GitHub profile. If we go into the README file, there is installation. So that will take you through the Docker builds and all of that stuff. Then there's the database thing, which is here. So we can get into the container using this command, and then we can run the rebuild script to rebuild the schema. Obviously, we haven't added this to the rebuild script yet, but I can use this command, though, to get into the container and run this manually. So I'm going to just go back into the code, and then we're just going to do Docker compose, and it was exec MySQL, because that's sorry, no. The container is DB. Then it's MySQL, because that's the command that we want to run against the container. -u, because that is the username, which is root, -p, and when we press enter, we should be asked for the password, which is set in the .env file. Okay, so now we do use Invoice app, because that is the name of the database that we've got, app, not apps. And we should now, if I did show tables, have these three tables, customer, invoice, and status, which we do. Let's bring that up to make it a little bit more easier to read. So what we want to do is we want to copy all of this lovely stuff into this prompt and see if this runs. And if this does run, then I will add it to the rebuild script and everybody's a winner. So let's just hit Control A, Control C. Sometimes this doesn't work, so this whole pasting, which it doesn't. Not today. Oh, come on. There we go. Third time's a charm. And there we go. We can see that the query was okay. We didn't affect any rows, but the query ran. Both the queries ran, actually, because there were two queries. Excuse me. If we do show tables, we should see that we have the invoice item here. And if we did describe of invoice underscore item, we should see that we have all the bits and pieces that we've created. So we have the ID, we have the reference, which is nullable. So the default here there is nullable, and it's null is yes. We have the description, we have the unit prices, we have the units themselves. These could perhaps be smaller integers, maybe. We have the total. The invoice ID, this is the connection to the invoice, and then we have the date created and the date updated, like we've had with the other bits and pieces, with all of this good magic going on. So when we go and create the invoice item, that gets changed. The date created gets changed to the current timestamp automatically, so we don't have to deal with that. And on update, this date updated field gets changed to the current timestamp too, using this extra piece of magic that we've got going on here. So that's pretty cool. And if I did show create table and then invoice item, we should see the output that was generated when we actually created this schema. So we have the constraints being put in. So we have the invoice item, that's the foreign key, which is the invoice item, and it references, the invoice table based on the invoice ID. So that's pretty good. That kind of covers the whole schema side of this project, which is good. No doubt I'll probably have to go in and tweak a couple of things, but we can do all this with the alter table commands, or I could just hack up the create tables passes in the schema. I'm not really worried too much about migrations at this stage because we don't really have much data at all. In fact, the only data we have is in the status table. So in here we just have these three referential data bits and pieces. But first of all, what I need to do, obviously, is I need to update the Rebuild Sql. This is the SQL file that we run, and it sources all the other SQL files to build out those things. Now, you might think, well, why am I doing this? Why don't I use Doctrine? But I've made the decision that I don't really want to have any libraries or frameworks in this application. I just want to build raw PHP and use raw SQL and build the mechanisms and the components around all of those things. Certainly not going to replace Doctrine, don't want to be doing any of that stuff. And I'm certainly not thinking that this is going to be a production-ready application. But you know, it's a good way for me to demonstrate object orientation, which we will get back onto next week when I start talking about how we can connect PHP to this MySQL database. First thing we need to do, though, is we need to add in the invoice underscore item, like so. Hit save. And then I'm going to just quickly run this now. So we do source. Well, if I show you on the browser, we can source the rebuild, and that's bind mounted into the -scripts directory within the MySQL container. So we can do that. We can run that. We can do source scripts, and then it's rebuild.sql. So we run all that, and we have we've got an error. Why has that failed to open? Maybe I've changed. Maybe I haven't called it. I've called it invoice item, not invoice items. Yes, I've excuse me. It's It's not an S, is it? It's just SQL. Let's hit save and then run that again. Hopefully that will run this time. Let's make some room. Yeah, that seems to have all gone apart from this. Cannot delete or update a parent row. Foreign key constraint fails. Ooh. Ooh. Database changed. Cannot delete or update parent. Is this because... Oh, this is interesting. I didn't expect this to happen. A parent row, a foreign key constraint fails. Okay, let's have a look and take a look at the what is left. So let's do show tables. I might have to just drop the database. Let's do a select all from status. I think I'm going to need to drop the database. Whoa, we've put all those in. We've put them in because we weren't able to drop them, because we weren't able to delete the database. So I delete the table. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is drop the whole database. I think that's probably the best solution for this. Yeah, well, it's a rebuild after all. It's going to rebuild it from scratch, right? So you might as well start from scratch. So I might just put in a drop and then a create. Yeah, I might do that. So up before this, I might do, whoops, on here. So I don't think you were able to see that. I got a load of errors. Ton of errors here. Cannot delete or update on a parent row. Foreign key constraint fails. This is because we had data in the status table, and the invoice table is constrained to the status table. So you can't delete the stuff out of the status because the invoice table will rely on the status. Which is a problematic. And what happened was when I ran the whole thing again, I actually added another set of, well, you can see here, another 2 sets, in fact, of statuses, which isn't good. So what I'm considering is to drop the database, then create the database, then use the database, then build all of these things, because then we start from scratch. Like I said, I'm not interested in any kind of migration. Not interested in that at all. Not at this stage anyway. So let's try that. Let's do a drop database. And then it's invoice app. And then it is, it is create database. Invoice app. I think this is correct. I'm just going by memory. Like I said, I haven't used SQL for a long time. So we're dropping it. That should be drop if exists. If exists. And then we created. I wonder if this is going to run. Let's see if we can do that. Yep, that's ran. Okay, so first of all, let's exit this. And then let's come back into it because I want to start with a fresh prompt. Let's run that. We have that's okay, but that's failed. Rebuild. You have an error checking on the invoice app. If exists database. Perhaps we can't do that. That's a bit of annoyance, isn't it? I'm sure there is a way of doing this. Is it drop database if exists rather than drop if exists database? Have I got this round the wrong way? I have. Okay, let's see. Yep, that looks all good to me. That looks all good to be. Database has changed. Yep, that seems good. So I need to put in a warning, I guess, that this will actually drop the database. I'll put that in the README file. But this rebuild script is doing exactly what it's saying. What it says on the tin. It is going to rebuild the whole thing. So we drop the invoice database. We create the database. We then use that database. Then we run all of these bits and pieces. And I think that's pretty good. I mean, let's just double check here. Show table. Whoops, not there. In here, show tables. We should have for customer invoice item and status. And if I did select all from status, we should have these three and only three. If I did a select all from invoice, we should have nothing in here. We should have nothing in the customer table, and we should have nothing in the other tables as well. And they are all created correctly, which is good. So yeah, I think that covers the whole SQL side, at least at this point anyway, in this stream, which is good because I can write SQL. I'm quite comfortable doing so, but it's not really where my passion lies. I'm more than happy to design a database. I'm fine with that, but I like to write the mechanics that work with the database or against the database, rather than the database themselves. I'm not overly passionate about optimization and performance in terms of the database. Whereas I know that a lot of other people, other developers, DBAs, database administrators, that's what they do, and that's what they enjoy doing, and they work on tremendous amounts of data, and they look for wacky and wonderful ways of optimizing these things. It's just not something that I necessarily have a desire to work on much. I will certainly do something when something goes wrong, right? If there's a bug, if I need to find a way of putting on another index on the table, if I need to do any kind of optimization, I'll do that if I need to do it, right? But what I'm trying to say is I'm certainly not a purist when it comes to database design. That I don't conform to the whole there is a right way of doing things with this, because I'm only doing what I know. And I know that I don't know enough. So, there you go. So, what I'm going to do is put my cup of tea down, and then I'm going to commit all of this stuff into here. But what I would like to do as well is I would like to just update the README file, because that is actually quite a destructive thing, right? We're dropping the whole database, and then we're creating a new one. That's actually very, very destructive. So I need to put, as someone with, who wants to write documentation and stuff, I need to put this down. So to populate the database, I should say to rebuild. Okay, let's change the language. To rebuild the database, run the following command from the host machine, or change the container. I'm going to put in a please note. Please note this will delete the database and create a new one. All data will be lost. You can't get any more brazen than that, right? So if I bring this out, where are we? Up here. Please note, this will delete the database and create a new one. All data will be lost. And then we need to probably put in a space between, like that. And I'm going to put all of this in italics as well. Okay, that's my little piece of due diligence. I can't even say that. So let's come out of that container. Bye-bye. And then let's do a git status. Let's see what we've changed. We obviously need to change the README file, the Rebuild SQL file, and the schema itself, the invoice item. So we're going to do a git add of these things. So README, and also MySQL asterisk. So that should add all of those. Let's just check those. Git status. And it has done. If I did a git branch, I can't spell git branch, we are on that branch. If I did a git commit -m, adding the invoice item schema, altering rebuild to run invoice item schema or .sql, and then also adding or dropping database and recreating from Rebuild SQL. Whoops. So there we go, and then we do a git with a G, git push to origin, and it's 22 MySQL schema invoice item. Pushing that up, that should all go up nicely. Yep, good. And then we need to do a git pull, not a git, sorry, it's hub pull request. That looks good to me. I'm gonna yeah, that's fine. I don't need to worry about anything else with that, I don't think. So we'll come out of that. I could have just done a closes, but whatever. Yeah, awesome. Let's go back to the browser. And it is in pull requests, it should be. I see what I've done. I haven't put this in as a description. This should have been a description rather than the title. I'll have to remember that for next time. Otherwise I'm going to make humongous titles for these things. Merge, confirm the merge. And then we're going to remove the branch. Bye-bye. After that's done. So back to the issues. We should see that we have that we can close. And all is good in the hood. I should really link the two up together using the closes tag. So you can do that in the commit. So you can close issues and stuff in the commit. So the pull request and so forth, which I should have done. But we have the MySQL folder. We have the schema. We have the invoice item. That's what we've just created. And in the rebuild script, which I go out this way, we have the rebuild of all of these things. I'm not sure why that's red. Maybe that's because it's a reserved word, perhaps. I'm not too sure. But we are dropping the database. We are creating the database. We're using the database. Then we're building the tables. And then we're inserting the data for the status.sql. And that covers that. So what I'm thinking of doing next week, and it's going to be probably Tuesday now, because I'm totally busy on Monday. But what I'm going to do on next week, starting next Tuesday, is I'm going to hook up the PHP to the MySQL database, the DB container. And what I would like to do, because we have data already in the status table, what I would like to do is I would like to use Codeception as a means of checking that there is data in that database, and making sure that it is the correct data that we are expecting. Then, once I have Codeception wired up to Codeception being the tool that we use to test this application, it sits on top of PHP Unit. It's a fantastic tool. Once we have that in place, we can then start working on how to make the connection between PHP and MySQL. And then once that is done, we can then start working on the hydration of these things. So I'll first start with hydrating the status entity with that. And then what we'll do is we'll start focusing on the individual tables again, and we'll build it out from that. And then hopefully by the end of that, that portion of work, we should have the connection between PHP and MySQL, and we should be able to hydrate the status and have a status object that represents a record in the status table. That is where I really want to get to. But I'm super impressed with the with how this is going already. You know, we've got the tables done. We managed to do this in a week, which is good. Which is great. I really wanted to get this finished this week, which we have done, which is great. So yeah, before I go, because there's other bits and pieces I wish to discuss, I want to just go back to the code just a second, and I want to talk about this project in general, because there are a couple of things that we have done that the code won't be able to conform to. For example, with the invoice item, we are saying that there is an invoice ID in this table. Well, there isn't an invoice ID at all in the entity. And so that needs to be set. Also, as you may have remembered, when I did the invoice entity itself, I created some mechanisms in here where we are setting the items, we are resetting the items, and then we're adding the item. Well, all this is doing, is this is updating an array of items, right? What we also need to do at this point is we actually need to hydrate the ID of the invoice to the invoice item using that connection. So there will be a little bit of work alteration in here, and this is a question I think that one has to this is a problem I think that one deals with. I totally forgot to put in the foreign key when I was designing this entity. I totally forgot to do that. I only remembered when I actually created the database table, the invoice item table. So the question then is, should I have started this project with the database first, rather than working on the entities, rather than working on the PHP stuff? There is always a strong argument that one needs to start with the data first, because that is the thing that is that is the foundation. So perhaps I should have done that. Perhaps I should have built these schemas first, knowing what the properties would be, and therefore I would know what the properties of the entities would be as well. Because at the moment this is disjointed. We don't have the invoice ID in this thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you're building an application like this, you need to be aware that there are things that it's like a tug of war. You need to be aware that a decision that is made in one area of the code or one part of the project, be it the database, will have a lot of impact to other parts of the application as well. And this gets very muddy when you're working in a team. When you're working in a team, let's say that has database engineers and then PHP engineers, and then you've got front-end engineers, and they're all working in perhaps separate departments. They all need to sing from the same hymn sheet. At the moment, I've flagged an issue here. The invoice item doesn't have an ID that references back to the invoice table. That's actually quite a major thing. That's a major thing. So if you're a PHP developer or a Python developer and you notice that there is a problem with the database, the structure, then you need to flag that up, and you need to discuss that with the database engineers and the administrators and so forth. Same when you look at something and you see a problem with the front end. And it's, I'm not just saying that the PHP is just the emphasis is on the PHP devs or the Python devs. It's also the front end engineers. If you notice that an AJAX call is taking too long, then maybe there's a problem with the way in which the data is indexed. Perhaps, I don't know. I guess it's a case by case basis. The point I want to make is that don't work in isolation, because one thing will impact many things. And you can wind yourself up when things are missing, because here the database. So if the database engineer in this case was just building this, and that's all they cared about, they were just building all of this stuff, then they would expect that you would have an invoice ID in the invoice item table, right? But without that knowledge, when building the invoice item entity, you know that's going to be missed off, and that's quite an integral thing to the flow of this data. But anyway, now what I would like to do eventually, and this is something that I'm going to be working on over the weekend, is I'm going to be building a Gatsby site that will host all of these videos, because we're on like the 22nd video of this streaming series. And then of course, once this has been done, we then have the actual course itself, which is going to be over like an hour and a half, I would imagine. So that itself is going to be a single video, which is going to be hosted or given to FreeCodeCamp. So I want to have some way. I don't want to just suddenly finish this whole project and then get on with something else. I would like to have a way to host this somewhere, because there's a lot of content here, and I think it's going to be very useful for people to not only see the course, but also see how the course is being developed. So I'm going to build a site on Gatsby.js, and it's going to be an SPA, a single page application, I think, at this stage, where the main image or the main part of it is going to be the course. And then after that, we're going to have thumbnails underneath, and you click on the thumbnail of each of the live stream videos, and then the main video, the embedded video, will change to whatever is the video that is associated to that thumbnail, if that makes sense. So you can watch all of this stuff, because unfortunately Twitch will remove your videos after, I think, 2 weeks, something like that, or a month. I don't know. I think it is 2 weeks, a fortnight. I've been archiving all of this to YouTube, sure, but I want to have a single place where people can go and see all of this content, because it's a nice sort of like isolated piece of content away from the other parts of perhaps the How to Code Well stuff. Now, I say I'm going to build it in Gatsby. I could also build it in perhaps Sculpin, which is a static site generator in PHP. I could use that. There's no problem there. But I'm going to host it on Hostinger. Hostinger sponsors this set of live streams. Hostinger is a hosting provider. It's very, very good. It's very affordable. It's very reliable. And at the moment, there is an offer for 82% off if you use the URL hostinger.com/Peter Fisher. And further to that, you get 82% off the hosting, but you also get a free domain as well, which is amazing and is definitely required for this project because I'll create a domain and stuff. Like I said, I've used Hostinger before. They're good. They're a great hosting company. If you use the discount code Peter Fisher, you get a further 15% off, which is awesome. So yeah, do check them out. I've put links in the description in the show notes below. And also, today is Friday. We have a podcast, which you can see at howtocodewell.fm. That will be available soon, later on today. I've got some very interesting guests on the howtocodewell.fm site, so go check that out. If you want to listen to something whilst you're having a run or you're on a commute or whatever, some really interesting guests around the web development industry. I'm not just talking about PHP here. Some of these people are JavaScript developers, front ends, developers. They are React developers. Some of them even work at Amazon. They even work at, we've got one coming on very soon for working Google. I can't really give much away on that, but it is very interesting. The amount of guests that I've had on has been fantastic. The amount of stuff that I've learned is wonderful as well. So that's howtocodewell.fm. And if you want to get yourself some hosting and a free domain at a very reasonable price, at a very reliable hosting platform, use Hostinger. That's hostinger.com/Peter Fisher. But for now, I'm going to shoot off because I've got a lot of work that I need to get on with this Friday. But I wish you all well. Happy coding, everyone. And I'll see you again next Tuesday at probably 7:30 British summer time. Thanks so much. Happy coding, everyone. Cheers.